We were talking to the guys about this the other day during the network meeting that is the cool thing about the network. There are all different kinds of shows and it be what it be, right? I mean, that's the deal.
Well, and not only that, but let's be honest. There are all kinds of shows that are really serious, taking on serious issues
No,
that
really?
affect working people. And we
This
had
is
a network show
this is not one of them.
called,
In case anybody's wondering, this is not
yeah,
one of
no,
them.
definitely not. Briefly, we had a network show called Strike Force 5. Do you
Oh
remember this
yeah, I
show?
remember that show.
And it's incredibly relevant right now because Stephen Colbert just had his final show on CBS. Strike Force 5 was a labor show. It
It
was
was.
a
It was.
show that was about working in the late night industry and was put on specifically to pay the staffs of those late night shows. And what was the content of the show? It was a bunch of late night hosts cracking on each other and, telling jokes and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We got to have some of that too in the network.
I think we will get there. I think we'll get there. I think we're going through this phase where we got a lot of folks who have a lot of serious things to talk about, but I think other things are starting to bubble up.
I have to agree with you though, Chris. I think we really need to have the Valley Labor Comedy Hour, the Labor Heritage Jokerama. I mean, there's definitely fertile ground to
Oh,
plow there.
I will say there is room in the Labor Heritage Power Hour. We don't need another show. We could just do a special edition of Labor comedy for real. I mean that would be a thing. All right, guys, you good to go?
You're going to need to make that script bigger, Chris.
Just squint.
There we go. Now we're talking. You think you got enough stuff for cold?
Yeah.
Because, I could keep talking your ear off about this, that, and the other thing.
I know you can. All right, folks, welcome to the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly. Chris, Patrick, Harold, we are here with clips from some of the more than 200 shows across the Labor Radio Podcast Network.
That's right. Every week, Chris, Patrick, and I dig through the network to find you highlights from labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world.
And we didn't have to do much digging this week. Union organising, bargaining fights, labour history, politics, culture, workplace struggles. If working people are talking about it, there's probably a labour radio show or podcast covering it.
Attacks on mine safety protections and black lung prevention.
So much of it has been big, bombastic, like big fights, but a lot of it has been happening behind the scenes in these little agencies, these smaller commissions, boards, federal, like places with beige offices.
France's Yellow Vest movement and the fight for democracy.
And then they started to meet at traffic circles. Eventually, they started to build cabins because they had nowhere to meet in the villages. They were basically without a community center anymore.
Why labor unions need to embrace podcasts, radio, and digital media.
We're in a historic area right now that you're involved with organizing in the warehouse industry.
Kate Hudson joins the first ever episode of SAG-AFTRA's I Am an Actor podcast.
I love also stripping people down, getting all of their self-consciousness.
You just want to break people down.
I want to break their spirit.
Starbucks Workers United and the company's escalating anti-union campaign.
One of our group specialist members said, "We're not interested in wages that are competitive with other companies that exploit their workers. We're interested in a living wage."
And the life and music of legendary labour activist Hazel Dickens.
I'm parting that split and going in there with a little box full of stuff. And I look up and there's Hazel Dickens. And she's like, "What are you doing here, boy?" And I just looked her dead in the eye and said, "I live here. What's your excuse?"
That's all coming up on this week's Labor Radio Podcast Weekly.
And cue the music. Okay, first up, Working People takes a hard look at the gap between Donald Trump's friend of coal miners image and the administration's actual policies towards miner safety and black lung protections. Labor journalist Kim Kelly joins the show.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. My name is Maximilian Alvarez, and today we're talking about coal miners and workers in the coal mining industry and what the government is doing to help them or hurt them under President Trump. Mr. I Love Coal Miners. In her latest report for In These Times, Kim Kelly writes, quote, on May 1st, International Workers' Day, Trump administration officials targeted the Federal Mine Safety and Health Review Commission, or the FMSHRC, abruptly firing Commissioner Moshe Marvit and closing down one of the agency's 3 offices. In total, the FMSHRC lost 16 workers as well as the entire Pittsburgh office that day. So to talk about all of this, I am really grateful to be joined once again by friend of the show. You love her, you know her, she's the one and only Kim Kelly herself. Just break down for folks like what the hell is actually happening here with this, little known agency that actually has, really important consequences for the lives and health of coal miners and their families.
So here's the thing, the FMS HRC, I kind of think of it as like talking about a ship named after Hillary, the FMS HRC. A lot of acronyms. Honestly, the acronyms of it all, that kind of plays into the issue here. Like, this is a smaller, respectively, not that sexy little government agency that impacts a very specific group of workers and communities. And it's being absolutely torn apart as part of this ongoing kind of Trump administration push to deregulate and de-skill and dethrone every possible government employee imaginable that isn't expressly falling in line with their authoritarian project. I did get to interview someone with very deep knowledge of the agency. Obviously, I had to keep their identity to ourselves because there's only like 30 people left. And he was just kind of saying it felt like the thought of someone in Trump world just kind of going down a list of agencies and like it's their turn. And this has happened to a lot of other like smaller commissions, boards, OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, their equivalent of this commission, they got like the NLRB has gotten all types of jacked up. Like it feels as if we're in kind of a new stage of this dismantling. Like we had the Doge era where it was like really big, bombastic slash and burn, intel's going through your computer, like lots of press coverage, and then Doge, it was KIA, took out back, shot, done with that. But this ongoing project has not ceased. It's just become quieter and arguably more insidious because public attention has understandably shifted towards all of the other cataclysms that our country and our government is responsible for right now. But this came across my radar, but I recognize that name, Moshe Marvit, because I remember earlier fights to get him confirmed to this arguably pretty atypical, pretty non-controversial agency. Like, he's a lawyer, he's pro-worker, seems like a fairly inoffensive type of guy to end up on this type of agency that essentially like deals with civil cases and worker discrimination cases. And now he gets fired out of nowhere. And it seems very clear that there is some kind of ideological purging kind of like effort behind this. I think Jordan mentioned that this was the first time in I think the 50 years of this agency's existence that someone had been removed from the commission in this way. And this commission was created as part of the 1977 Mine Act, which is really honestly one of our, I think, lesser known but more impressive pieces of labor legislation in this country. Is obviously coal miner specific, but it really did a good job of laying out very specific protections and building up agencies like MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration. It's a good law. It's a good law. And this is something that obviously the people that run coal mines and make money off of coal mines and, get their little greedy fingers all over coal miners' paychecks. Of course, there's stuff in there that they would prefer not to have to deal with, like safety regulations, like worker safety laws, like union organizing rights. And something that stuck with me when I was talking to this anonymous worker at the agency, they were saying, the fact that there's 3 people left, one's Republican, and there's 2 Democrats whose terms end in August. And with Moshe currently out of the picture, if they lose people, they lose the ability to have a quorum, which essentially means they can't do anything. And I asked them, do you think more people will be confirmed? What do you think will happen? And they said something that I thought was so interesting and terrible. Like, well, what if the reason that there isn't a big rush to confirm even Trump loyalists is that they just don't want to deal with enforcing this law at all? Like, what if they're trying to kind of kill it by 1,000 cuts by just chipping away at things? And I thought that was a really astute and stressful observation to make, because this is the thing, right? As it's not all like this onslaught against worker safety and human rights and every other possible decent thing that people are able to, derive from this government. Like, so much of it has been big, bombastic, like big fights, but a lot of it has been happening behind the scenes in these little agencies, these smaller commissions, boards, federal, like places with beige offices that they're not as exciting, they're not as photogenic, they're not as, they're not going to get headlines necessarily, but they really have a very important role to play.
All right, gang, that's going to wrap things up for us today. I want to thank our guest, the indomitable Kim Kelly, freelance journalist and labor writer. I'm Maximilian Alvarez. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever.
Hey, this is Carmen Rodriguez from El Cafecito del Día. At LACLA, we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speaks. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
The Yellow Vest movement shook France with grassroots organizing that rejected politics as usual. The Green and Red podcast talks with anthropologist Ida Susser about the movement's origins, alliances, and state repression.
Yeah, you remember that? That was not so long ago, but the entire world was looking at these folks who were pulling out the yellow vests from the back of their cars and staging protests.
Actually, one of our films in the Labor Film Fest this month, I think it was last week, was about that Case 137, a terrific French film set during that whole period. So that it feels very fresh to me.
In the interview, they refer to traffic circles, but in England we call them roundabouts.
Oh, is that what those are supposed to be? I mean, I usually call a roundabout that thing I do in the parking lot, burning donuts, that kind of thing.
Well, you are an actor.
I am an actor.
Welcome to Green and Red, scrappy politics for scrappy people. A regular podcast on radical, environmental and anti-capitalist politics. Brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
Welcome to the Green and Red podcast. I am your co-host, Scott Parkin, in Berkeley, California. Bob is out today, but I am excited to be joined by Professor Ida Susser, who is a distinguished professor of anthropology at Hunter College in the Graduate Center at City University of New York. And Professor Susser has published on popular mobilization, social movements, the urban commons in the U.S., Europe, Southern Africa. She's the author of a number of books, but most recently, the author of The Yellow Vests and the Battle for Democracy, which you can also get as open access. And so you can get a free download of it. But Professor Susser, welcome to the Green and Red podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And so we're going to be talking about the Yellow Vest movement, which is a French worker movement, a social movement, which really kicked off in the late 20-teens. And according to your book, and then also just knowing about the Yellow Vest, it was initially motivated by rising crude prices and fuel prices, which sounds strangely familiar to what we're dealing with today, high cost of living, which we could also say is affordability, economic inequality. But just to kind of kick off, how can you give us a little bit of like, where did the Yellow Vests start? They didn't actually start in Paris, right? They started in other places and eventually converged on Paris.
Yeah. So in 2018, President Macron in France, he leveled a new tax, which was what they call a diesel tax. And the problem with a diesel tax is not so much, I think, in this country, but in Europe, all the other gases, first of all, gas is much more expensive than here. And then regular gas was heavily taxed, but the diesel gas was not taxed. And so people bought very small cars, very cheap cars, much smaller than here. And they were using diesel gas because that was the only gas that wasn't taxed. So they felt that they were steered as working class people into diesel gas. And then suddenly Macron put a tax on this. And it was their last straw. It wasn't that other things weren't also a problem, like food for the end of the week, food for their kids, rent. But suddenly to put a tax on diesel, which they had all chosen because it didn't have a tax, and you had to drive. The buses had been reduced, transportation, the trains had been cancelled. There's all sorts of old rail lines in rural areas of France. They used to take people from the coast to the king's palace. All of that is shut down. And so you want to buy some bread, you have to drive 10 miles. The post office is almost not in every village. So and then they got the diesel tax. So people were outraged. They sent around emails, nobody listened. And then they started to meet at traffic circles. This is June, July, August. And they would meet there. And then they started to discuss these problems. And actually at the traffic circles, eventually they started to build cabins because they had nowhere to meet in the villages. They were basically without a community center anymore. The cafes had shut down. I lived in a village with no cafe. They had a little school for 3 and 4-year-olds, and then you had to bus your children out. Not even a shop. You couldn't buy bread. So this is how it went. And they met together in the rural areas, and nobody heard of them. It was completely off the radar, no news, nothing. Then they decided.
And how widespread was it?
Well, it was throughout France. There's a map that shows them 400, 500 traffic circles throughout France, Brittany, the south of France, the various industrial areas, everywhere. And Bordeaux, everywhere. The mountains, and the people came down from the mountains. For example, clinics were being closed. For a long time, there'd been this reduction in services. So if a woman was pregnant, she might have to drive an hour to have that baby. And that was not only diesel tax, but time and danger. Little windy roads. So there was a tremendous upset about this. And as they met at the traffic circles, they started to realize they had so much more in common. They were so upset about so many things. And by the time they said, all right, we're going to Paris, nobody has listened to us. So they decided to go into the center of Paris on Saturday, November 17th, 2018. Wow. It was amazing. 300,000 people went into the central. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. And throughout Paris, middle-class people were frightened. And they weren't sure what it was. And the Yellow Vests finally got attention, and it burst into international news. And they came every single Saturday, up and down, more people, less people, right up until the COVID shutdown in March 2020. And they counted it. Act 1 was November 17th, Act 2 was the next Saturday, all the way through Act 70, Act 71, all the way till March 2020. They came into Paris, and they had these wild marches. Meanwhile, they also were in Toulouse, Bordeaux, Marseille and the central cities as well.
Professor Susser, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great.
Hi, this is Steve Matthews, the host from Riverside Rank and File. We're part of a network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. Find us at laborradionetwork.org. Thank you.
This week on the Worker Power Hour, our friend Steve Matthews argues that Labour needs to fully embrace podcasts, radio, and digital media as organising tools for a changing workforce.
I absolutely love that we have two network shows coming together here. The Worker Power Hour and Steve Matthews, who's the host of Riverside Rank and File. I love it when we see that network synergy.
Speaking of which, we should do a little sneak preview here. Steve connected us actually with the folks at the Worker Power Hour, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, Chris, do you want to talk about this now?
I just want to...
Okay. All right, go for it. Yeah.
Tease it a little bit. And they showed up at our network meeting this week, and which was great. We always love seeing folks, from network shows, getting to meet them. That's what that's all about. And then I didn't know about this. Maybe you guys did. Completely out of the blue, they said, oh, by the way, we're working on putting together a 24/7, network, and we could use some content.
A streaming radio network,
exactly.
In fact.
Yep.
Yeah, could be coming soon.
Stay tuned. More to come. Somebody was just saying synergy. I think that's what we're talking about.
It is all about coming together. Synergy, solidarity. It's strange how those two things seem to be related.
We're back. This is the Worker Power Hour with Randy Corgan on the Teamsters 1932 Broadcast Network. Airing live from San Bernardino. Longtime organizer, first-time radio host. Back at the mic after our break. We are joined by Steve Matthews. He is a former colleague of mine who's worked in the labor movement for a very long time. He was, I think his first union job was a Teamster job.
International Teamsters Union organizer.
Yep. And, then he went to work for SEIU and a few other unions over the years. Came to work at 1932 for a while. And then ultimately he's now retired. And we appreciate your service to the membership as a whole and to the labor movement. You're still active. And why don't you want to introduce yourself and talk about, you have your own podcast too.
I have Riverside Rank and File podcast. We're now in our 12th show. We're privileged to have you, Randy, come and do 2 shows with us, and trying to get on a pace of at least one show being produced every week.
And it's good to see this platform leveling up and others using this platform. I think it's potentially a very powerful platform and a place for us not only to communicate, but start to build the library of information. And that library will help us, really, build out a robust sort of, information when it comes to labor, different perspectives, a different understanding or, different viewpoints, but consistently bringing more and more resources for people to be able to listen to, how important the labor movement is and how important it is to become active and make something happen. What are your thoughts on that, thus far?
Well, I think it's wise for us to build that library, if you would, of resources for people to use. I think there's any number of, from labor history in this area, there's a deep fight for farm workers here. And in Coachella, which is still part of Riverside County, which is, my area of the equation, if you would. And we had Amalia Datslan on, who at 17 years of age was trying to build unity between the Filipino farm workers and the Mexican-American farm workers, and was grabbed by security from one of the planters and thrown into a van, and then that caused a strike from the Filipino workers walked out of the fields. So that type of history is something that will teach people what we can do to win, right? And we're in a historic area right now that you're involved with organizing in the warehouse industry, which this is the biggest fight that we have going on in labor in this part of the world. It's an historic challenge that we should have all the resources we can from all the podcasts and anyone that can talk about this to bring support to what's going on in that fight.
And speaking of that, younger workers are consuming content differently than we did. We're obviously old dogs here compared to that youngster sitting right over there. You know, according to him, we're all baby boomers, which we're technically not baby boomers, but that's okay. He's so far removed from our generations that he feels like everybody's a baby boomer. That's okay. You know, we have fun with this. I mean, there isn't a day that goes by that we have a conversation and say something that the younger generation, and we obviously get to witness that firsthand with Robert here, that we get to experience those differences in communication and how it's being consumed. I guess my question is, how do you think labor should adapt to this?
I think that everyone in labor should pay attention to the fact that we have not been communicating with younger people the right way. And the attention span is also an issue, right? People have a lot going on with their lives. And
are you saying he doesn't pay attention?
No, I say he's got a lot going on in his life. So each of the things that he can pay attention to, he's trying to get me in trouble. Yeah. I can get in trouble on my own. So I just think in the podcast that I do, we don't usually do more than 20, 22 minutes. It is an attention span issue. At 20 minutes, I've got my producers waving to me and said, done. If I can't get it in 20 minutes, it's not worth saying because people will tune out. And I think that's a piece of it, right? If you're driving and you listen to a podcast, you can do that as opposed to have the radio on. You have alternatives as how you're going to ingest your information.
So that means nobody is listening to the show right now. Everybody tuned out over an hour ago.
Except you do segments.
I'm just kidding.
So you do.
Yeah, we
segments,
do. We take them.
Right?
We take the segments and then release the segments.
You get bite size. So it's the same thing.
I'm just having fun with it. So.
Okay. So
we only got a couple minutes left. Steve, you want to close up on anything?
No, I just appreciate the chance to come on your show. I mean, you've got the senior aspect of this, that you're 3 years and you got seniority, and we just need to nudge people. When you came onto my podcast, you challenged the rest of the labor leaders to step it up, and we need to tell the truth to each other, and that's the truth. There is a certain amount of people that are asleep at the switch. Maybe it's good meeting people in their own way. It's time to wake up and it's time to lead, and use the podcast as a wedge to make that happen. Mm-hmm. We have support out there that our listeners want to see something happen, and we'll get the reactions like you just got, that we're telling the truth to people.
Hey, this is Mike Strukin from the Labor Force Podcast. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
All right, here's a brand new show from Herald's Union. Actor Kate Hudson joins I Am an Actor to talk about getting her SAG, that would be Screen Actors Guild, back before they merged with the American Federation of Television, Radio, and Radio Artists. Did I get it?
Oh,
Did I get it?
Yeah, you got it. You got it. It's a mouthful.
It is. So SAG and AFTRA, two different unions, and they merged. Don't ask me what year. I know it was in the last 10, I think.
2012, I believe.
Okay. Anyway, she got her first SAG card at the age of 13, but we didn't use that part in the clip, did we, Patrick? What did she talk about in our clip?
Well, I've always wanted to know just what it's like to be an actor, and who better than Hollywood royalty, Kate Hudson, to explain what it's like to be an actor. And she really focuses on the craft in this extract that we have prepared.
Okay, now I am going to step up for my union sister here and say that even actors who are at the top of the call sheet, as we like to say, they still have to do the same work as working class actors like me who are pounding the pavement looking for that next job. So one of the things I'm really looking forward to from this show is pulling back the curtain a little bit so that people can see just what goes into the work that we do, including when they're Hollywood royalty like Kate Hudson.
Life on the red carpet.
So wait a minute. Isn't Kate the one who was in that the Neil Diamond movie? I think it was last year. Was that?
Yes.
I love
yes,
that movie.
Song Blue.
Don't pick on Kate. Don't pick.
That movie.
She was so good.
so much.
Thank
If
you.
folks haven't seen Song Sung Blue, Patrick, do you know Neil Diamond? What's your favorite Neil Diamond song?
It's that Sweet Caroline thing, isn't
Of
it?
course, Sweet Caroline. Neil Diamond is about more than Sweet Caroline. Yeah, actually, you should see this film. It's
Definitely.
brilliant, and it's not just Kate Hudson. It's also Wolverine. Hugh Jackman.
Poor
There we
guy.
go.
Poor Hugh. He's like, hey, Wolverine. I have a name.
Well, do they sing Sweet Caroline in it?
They do, but you have to wait. They don't do it right away.
Yeah, they absolutely. Seriously, this sounds like a stupid fluff movie.
It isn't.
You watch it, and it will move you so much. It's a
Oh.
wonderful film.
We'll just say you're welcome first right here. Also, can I just say, if I was producing a show and I had access to people like, I don't know, Kate Hudson, would I have them on the show? Hell yeah, I would. So
of course.
Just people like Harold Phillips instead.
He's top of my call list.
I'm available. Just saying.
My name is Kate Hudson, and I am an actor.
This episode of I'm an Actor is presented by Apple TV. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Yeah, welcome
fun.
to I Am an Actor.
I'm so happy you're doing this. This is going to be so interesting, and we get to talk to you. You get to talk to so many different people,
including you, which is
the creme de la creme.
You are an actor.
I am an actor.
It's so nice to have you here.
The good, bad, and the ugly.
I can't wait to get into all of it.
I mean, you said that your mom was more spontaneous and your father was more methodical. How did that influence your own technique?
I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I think it changes all the time.
It does.
It's like there's been some years in my life where I've felt like being completely unprepared has been really great and fun for comedy. Like just like coming in and feeling like my mom, like super spontaneous, or that's like great. And then as I've gotten older, I find like that my process has gotten even more like heavier, a little more intense and thoughtful.
And it's such a great dovetail of two worlds for you to be kind of like this more, like one side of you is a free spirit and kind of more spontaneous, and the other side is more studied and researched, and like you kind of can't ask for more than that.
No, but it all leads down to just letting it go. And your performances are always so grounded and so truthful and fun.
Thanks.
But then also sad, like, you know what I mean? Like,
be,
you have a crazy range, which is so fun to watch.
Thanks. I love it. I love it so much. I love talking about acting with actors because it's such a weird like world to get into. I find us to be very humorous. The like when you think about what we do for a living, it's so, from the outside looking in, it's just so silly. But from the inside, it's like powerful and it's intense, and it's like, in order to get somewhere, you have to kind of look silly from the outside, you know, but you have to
be really vulnerable.
Yeah, and you have to reach internally you're reaching all these places, different places to kind of like get there. I think it's just such an interesting, weird career path. But when you love it, like I was talking about this with Scotty McCarthy, who plays my brother on the Running Point. Like, I don't know what I would do if someone said I couldn't act anymore. I'd be like, that's devastating. That would be devastating. I don't think that's ever like not in my cards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No matter where it is or what it is.
There's nothing else for you. Nothing.
I just, what is
if you were
life?
a coach, I would take all of your classes.
I would
be so
love-
inspired by you. Do you know what I mean?
I want to teach.
Yes.
I want to
do.
get older and I want to teach. I really do.
It's
I
so
love
fun.
watching, especially like young talent. I get inspired
Yes.
by watching young brains kind of figure out who they are or what their process is. And I love like also stripping people down, like getting all of their self-consciousness.
You just want to break people down.
I want to break their spirits.
Do you learn from that though? Like watching these younger actors come up, like does that help you evolve as an actor?
Yeah, I think the great lesson in acting is observation. I take everything in. I'm also one of those people that you think I'm not doing that, and I see everything, which is like one of my.
Which makes people reveal even more.
I love it.
Yeah.
Some people are different, and I this might sound controversial, but because I think that sometimes people think that great acting, you can see that you can see it. And I have an aversion to watching work. Like, I don't want to see the work. I really want to see, like, I don't want to see it at all. It doesn't mean that you always like get there, but like the goal is for it to feel completely effortless and in someone's body, you know,
embody it. Yeah.
Or the discovery, the things that surprise you in a scene.
Yeah, and also like the relationship to great words. We can do as much as we can, but if you don't have the words, you know, like the relationship that one actor has to a monologue or a great, you know, monologue is very different than another great actor has to that. And I think that sort of like says so much about the writing.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that a lot in terms of like we don't get to choose what we do. Every once in a while we get these opportunities to say really great words and really work on great material. And sometimes we have to do the best we can with like mediocre material.
Yeah, but that's the challenge also as an actor.
Yeah,
it's like,
how do you make something better?
Yes.
You know, that's not the dream. Right? The dream is to take all of the things that you've learned and apply it to great writing. I mean, that's how I feel about, you know, the goal. You know?
You're such a rock star.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I'm an Actor, a SAG-AFTRA podcast, hosted by John Brockett and Jamie Chung. We'll see you next week.
Hey, it's Chris Garlock from the Labor Radio Podcast Daily. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. More than 200 labor radio and podcast shows across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where the people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
That's right, folks. Actors are working people too, and so are baristas in coffee shops. Another new show to the network, Heat the Ground Up, continues its oral history of Starbucks Workers United, documenting how Starbucks escalated its anti-union campaign as baristas organized stores nationwide.
Feels like Starbucks is having a moment right now. I mean, that campaign's been going on for years, but there's at least 2, maybe 3 movies out now. They've ramped their campaigns up. They've been going on strike. I mean, it just seems like there's more stuff going on.
Well, yeah, if Starbucks had actually sat down and negotiated a contract with them when this first started, this wouldn't be a thing. But it's been like 2.5 years, and the people who work at Starbucks are fed up. That's why they had a day of action on May 23rd.
Welcome back to Heat the Ground Up, an oral history of Starbucks Workers United. I'm Clarissa, your host for this Haymarket Originals podcast. Together, we'll follow one of the most important labor fights in a generation through the voices and perspectives of the workers who organized it from the ground up. In this episode, we're rewinding the clock a bit to the spring of 2022, just as contract negotiation kicked off at Elmwood and months before the Red Cup Rebellion later that winter. From the moment Elmwood won the vote in December 2021, interest in organizing exploded across the country. Starting in January, month over month through the first half of 2022, the rate of stores filing for elections with the NLRB looked exponential, averaging 2 stores filing every day. Just a few months after a handful of baristas proved it could be done in Buffalo, New York, the union had over 6,000 workers and over 200 stores on board for the fight, with no signs of slowing down. As baristas joined the union in droves, Starbucks turned focused store-by-store union busting into a company-wide war against its own baristas, union and non-union alike. From the jump, baristas were preparing to sit down across the table from management to negotiate a contract. As new stores rapidly filed and won elections across the company, organizers from these drives were immediately invited into the contract fight.
Early days of the campaign was really about getting as many worker voices involved as possible, and it was messy. I'm not going to say that it wasn't. There were, a handful of Starbucks workers who might have had some knowledge of labor or unions, but it wasn't the vast majority of us.
Every union store had the ability to elect a bargaining delegate to participate in the bargaining process. This constantly expanding group of workers from across the U.S. would gather weekly to discuss what they wanted in a contract, what precedent there was to build on from other contracts, and what language would cover their needs. They developed their own democratic systems that encouraged participation from as many stores as possible. Baristas across the union were talking to fellow union workers and saying, "Oh, you don't know anything about bargaining a contract? Nothing about labor law? Never read a legal document like this before in your life? No problem. We'll learn this together. What's important is that you're a part of this." And when they hopped on calls to hash out the contract language, they started with what they knew, what could make the workplace better for everyone.
We just talked about what we wanted. We broke things down into categories, I guess you could say. And we're like, okay, this is a problem that exists at my store. This is a problem that exists. Okay, this is what we want to say. How do we legalese it and be, user-friendly to read?
In these bargaining committee meetings, baristas identified issues they had long struggled with in the workplace. Many were the very issues that drove their own stores to file for an election and join the union fight. Two obvious and immediate priorities were improving wages, especially through the rollout of credit card tipping, and winning just cause.
The company could fire you for just about anything. They didn't have to give a cause. They didn't have to give a reason for it. You could appeal it. There was an internal appeals process that also goes through the company. So it was we wanted to make sure that workers were protected from being fired for discriminatory reasons. A manager known to be racist has made racist, comments. And then, you've got all of these workers of color who are being fired and they're for baloney reasons, and they have no recourse. And so we wanted just cause. We wanted a grievance procedure put into place. We wanted a way to be able to fight back against this. So that was always at the very top of the list. We wanted to see an improvement in wages. We have this multi-billion-dollar employer who has not been shy during the pandemic about saying how much money the company is making in the middle of the pandemic, more money than they did pre-pandemic, and workers were not seeing any of that.
Wages was really convoluted because it has so much to do with cost of living and pay scales, and the company's way of allocating wages was ridiculous. They have their own concept of geographical regions and wages divided up that way. And we sort of had to re-engineer it from the ground up. The whiteboards and flip paper boards that we had was just the most insane scrawling numbers and calculations and functions to try to figure out how to, get a number out at the end that lets you live a dignified life. Because the company claims that they have competitive wages. That's what they say. That actually Starbucks has really competitive wages, and so there's no need for a change. And one of our group specialist members said, "We're not interested in wages that are competitive with other companies that exploit their workers. We're interested in a living wage," which I found to just be really special.
Heat the Ground Up is brought to you by Haymarket Books as the second season of Haymarket Originals, the home for audio deep dives by and for the left.
Hey, this is Gene Lance from Dallas, Texas, where we have the Workers Beat and the Workers Beat Extra. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. More than 200 labor radio and podcast shows across the country and around the world.
And finally, Mind Wars Forum remembers legendary Labour musician Hazel Dickens through stories from her nephew, Buddy, tracing her journey from West Virginia mining camps to Labour movement stages around the country.
I absolutely love that we started our clips with a story about black lung disease and miners, and we're rounding it out with a story about Hazel Dickens, who fought for the miners, and still to this day they're having a music festival to raise funds for the Black Lung Association.
And where could people find out about that, Harold?
I think there's something on the National Labor Arts calendar at laborheritage.org.
And I should also mention that in Harlan County, USA, which we just showed in the Labor Film Festival, I'd forgotten actually, there is this wonderful classic clip of there's a bunch of music by Hazel, but there's actually video of Hazel at if I'm not mistaken, it's a UMW, a mine workers convention, and she's singing. And she's just, she was amazing. She was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, she really deserves to be celebrated.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Mine Wars Forum, brought to you by the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum. I'm Taylor, Communications Director for the museum. If you didn't know, the museum is a people-powered grassroots institution that educates and preserves a people's history of the coal wars. That's a bloody effort to unionize the southern coal fields of West Virginia at the turn of the 20th century. Today on the pod, we are speaking about a woman who was born in the coal fields of southern West Virginia and sang these words: "United we stand, divided we fall. For every dime they give us, a battle must be fought. So working people, use your power, the key to liberty." Those, of course, are the opening words to Hazel Dickens' song, "They'll Never Keep Us Down." That was released about a half a century after the mine wars, but it is still a part of a legacy of resilience that endures. To talk about Hazel, her work, and her legacy, we're joined by one of her family members, her nephew, Buddy Dickens. Thank you for joining us today, Buddy.
Yes, ma'am. Glad to be here.
And just to keep the through line here for people who might not be as familiar with Hazel's story, she's born in Montcalm. In her late teens or early 20s, she moves to Baltimore, and then she's working at factories, she's working restaurant jobs, and then she starts to get into the music scene because she's already kind of cut her teeth playing with the family, but they weren't playing out together as a family, but that's where she got her musical knowledge from. And she also had a love for the music from the place that she was from, West Virginia. And something about Hazel that I've kind of gleaned from research and you talking about her is just like this spirit she had of justice, of right and wrong, whether it's, her music about the power of unions or uplifting the working class or feminism. Is that something you experienced with her, with your personal relationship with her?
Oh, as far as her standing for what's right or what's wrong concerning other people, she had that old mountain type justice. It was either just, there was no cut or dry. It was either wrong or it was right. And she didn't mind telling you about it. She didn't care. Well, I won't say that she didn't care. It would hurt her if she lost a friendship. Same as it does me. When someone you think you know about and have become very good friends with can cut you loose simply because of your beliefs, well, then they're not very much of a friend to. That's the way our family perceives it. And I think most mountain people do. But, it would hurt her, but you would never see it. So, but it was either right or wrong. And if it was wrong, she didn't want no part of it. I'll go ahead and tell that story that I told you I wasn't going to tell.
Okay. So, I love this story. I'm so glad you're going to tell it.
Well, I won't tell. I just won't say where. I just will say it involved piston strike.
Right.
So that I had lived in this town where there was a tent. The union was there. Picket line was there. A very prominent place. It would probably be the number one spot to be with a picket line. So, and I worked in a restaurant. So it was a 24-hour restaurant. That might tell a little something. But anyhow, when the strike was going on, I would pack up the leftovers at breakfast when we would go and start serving lunch. And I would take it up to the tent and give it to them guys so they'd have something to eat. Because, you know, these guys, they're not working. They're on the picket line. Who knows what they have to eat or drink. So, but anyhow, when I left the job and I would go home, I'd have to drive right by this picket line. So gathered some things up and went up there. And, you know, the tent has this little split in it. So I'm parting that split and going in there with a little box full of stuff. And I look up and there's Hazel Dickens. And she's like, "What are you doing here, boy?" And I just looked her dead in the eye. I said, "I live here. What's your excuse?" So, but she just laughed, and then I had to go back to work.
Well, I'm going to sign us off now for the podcast. All right.
All right. I appreciate you.
Hey, this is Dan Golodner from Tales from the Ruther Library. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
All right, folks, time now for our speed round shows you should know. And on Workers Beat Extra, our old friend Gene Lance says that labor may feel under siege in 2026. I don't know, Gene. Yeah, I guess we do. But he says workers are actually building new strength and organizations in ways that the media often misses.
Ed and Phil talk with Mid-America Carpenters Regional Council organizer Rocky Cloth about the 4 tiers of organizing and what strong union representation really looks like on the workers' mic.
On the Powerline podcast, Ryan talks with IBEW Local 3 Master Electrician Josh Nieves about union culture, leadership, recruiting young workers, and what brotherhood actually looks like on the job.
Maryland labor history host Bill Barry, who has been putting out a tremendous amount of content. He's come late to the game, but he's really bringing it. Bill sits down with former major leaguer Phil Bradley to talk about organizing professional baseball players and labor issues inside Major League Baseball.
And on The Wealthy Ironworker, Rusty argues that apprentices should be learning real skills, not just sweeping floors, and that journeymen should keep developing long after they top out. And frankly, shouldn't we all?
All right, folks, these are just a few of the shows you should know right here on the Labor Radio Podcast Network. And that is a wrap for this week's Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, your roundup from more than 200 shows across the network.
Find links to every show at laborradionetwork.org and follow us on all the socials, #LaborRadioPod.
And folks, we love hearing from you. Hit us up at info@laborradionetwork.org.
If you're a regular listener to the weekly and you want to let other people know,
you could shout it from the rooftops.
That would actually be pretty cool.
Very cool. Here's an easier way. Wear a Labor Radio Podcast Network t-shirt. They're union made. They come in all sizes, small to XXX, and 2 colors.
Order yours today, laborradionetwork.org.
And wear it proudly, especially if you're going to be joining us at Labor Notes, where you're going to see a few people wearing those. And hey, folks, I am an actor. Chris, Patrick...
No, definitely not.
Maybe not. But even so, all 3 of us are covered by a union because this podcast is recorded under a SAG-AFTRA collective bargaining agreement.
All clips are shared under fair use. The views expressed are those of the producers and hosts and not necessarily those of the network. Today's show produced by Patrick Dixon, Harold Phillips, and me, Chris Garlock.
Thanks for listening to the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly.
And folks, stay active.
Stay tuned
to your local labor radio show or podcast.
And we'll see you all next week.
You mixed it up there. I expected Patrick to come in, and I was like, wait, whoa.
I know. I like to kind of. I'm trying to sort of develop it to break that, make it a little punchier at the end there. We're getting there.
You want a recognizable pattern, but you don't want it to be too by
Exactly.